Okay, you're getting low key me today. And I apologize. I'm sorry. It's been a day where I have spent just most of the day staring at different books and just slogging through the tough, in need of an editor, in need of a lot of work parts, and my brain hurts. So I'm bringing the energy down because otherwise I would just screaming like I'm a character in some kind of eldritch horror role playing game, just losing sanity by the second. So I'm very happy to instead do something just a bit more chill and hopeful, which is where we find ourselves today. Ladies and gentlemen, guys, gals, non binary pals, friends, writers, makers, doers, dreamers, pantsers, plotters, character enthusiasts, storytellers, people who know the value of pressing enter on the keyboard to space paragraphs, anybody who can name all 7 layers in a 7 layer dip, people who can appreciate a good baked potato, anybody who's ever decided to do a thing and then realized, oh God, I'm in way in over my head, people who are eagerly waiting the warm weather, anybody who's saved a file and then couldn't remember if they saved it, so they saved it again under a different file name, but in the same folder right next to the spot they saved the first one. Anybody who's ever stopped to wonder, hey, I don't know how this works, then they fall down a rabbit hole for 10 minutes and then they don't feel like they have any exact answer. They just have more questions. And most importantly, the comrades. This is the Writer's Chat for February the 27th, the last Tuesday of the month of February. And it's a leap year, don't forget. So March happens later. Plan your billing and subscription shit accordingly. And through no fault of my own, I continue to be John, the guy who's going to help you write better. I hope you're doing well. Like I said, spent the bulk of today um, hammering my face against a wall. I don't know how else to describe it. When you have multiple books open and you are toggling through different manuscripts, just trying to kick and claw and scratch and scream and make some progress, it can feel like a lot. So if I sound uh worn down for the moment, I am. And I'm hopeful that today, answering these questions from all people on all corners of social media, plus the questions from those people in chat, I'm hoping to like pick myself back up and have some hope in the world, not to be a little bit too melodramatic, but at least end up in a better place than where I'm at right now because I'm tired. But let's answer some questions. Let's see if we can help some people. Let's see if we can bring some kind of a solution to a problem and build some bridges rather than just knock things down. Let's get started, shall we? With question number one. What are the three fundamentals a writer should start with when beginning a new book? I love this question. I love the basic fundamental stuff because if you can master or get a handle, master's too permanent. How about if you get really good at the fundamentals and you really develop them, then no matter what premise you come up with, no matter what kind of story you want to tell, you've got the right tools to get started. And we can break this down into three fundamentals that will at least give you a good what's the word I want to use? A good beginning, a good setup. They're not it's not as simple as like have a good first act, have a good second act, have a good third act, but um there are definitely fundamentals you can use to take advantage of in order to move forward. And the first one is going to be, and it's not even really grammar, although we could we can brush grammar aside and kind of lump it into the first element, which is understanding that your reader is trying to imagine a movie in their head when they read your book. And that writing your story, whatever it is, whatever genre it is, anything else, you're not just like telling a child the story, like then this happened, then this happened, then that happened, then this happened. Like there's not a quiz at the end of every chapter. You don't want to just dictate the story at somebody's face. You want to make the reader feel like as they read the action, as they read the events of the story, as they read the dialogue, as they read the descriptions, what they're doing is imagining it. You're encouraging imagination, and you're encouraging a connectivity between thoughts and ideas that allow your reader to really get a handle on your story. That it isn't just you showing off that you made up a thing that you really, really, really super like. It's about putting that movie in the reader's brain. Let's call that fundamental number one. Fundamental number two, understanding that your characters, by and large, whether they are animals, aliens, robots, supernatural beings, uh, vigilante comic book heroes, detectives, romance characters, whatever, understanding that your characters are going to be read by human readers, we presume. And those human readers likely don't have magic powers or immortality or infinite wealth, or they don't have the stuff going on that the characters in your story have going on. They're people, but those readers are trying to connect with those characters. So there has to be some element of your character construction, whether it's the big giant rich guy that we all fall in love with in the romance novel, or it's the little wizard that could over there in the young adult novel, or anything else. Your reader is going to try and connect with, and not just know in that factual sense, like there's no quiz at the end of the chapter, but come to understand that they can relate to the life of that character. They see something of their experience or their possible experience relayed to them through that character. Oh, here's this character. They're having trouble, they're unhappy at their day job. That sense of like, oh, I hate my day job. It's killing me. That's a feeling that I, the reader, sympathize with. I like this character more because we have something in common other than we're just, a mammal or something. And the more far out and atypical and supernatural and magical and all that stuff, the more detached from reality your character is, the more critical it becomes that you have some kind of, you know, foundation point for your reader, whomever they might be, to relate to. Because if you just have a character who does cool stuff, I can turn into this. I can do this. I can cast this spell. I can, make my hair orange or whatever. And the reader just sees stuff happening, but they can't connect with the character. The character's not going to hold their interest, and ultimately the story's not going to hold their interest. Which I don't know if you know this is like the worst thing you want. You want the reader to keep reading. And if we put a movie in their head and we create characters that they can relate to, you will have a much easier time making that happen. Here's the third thing: your story needs a conflict, a crisis, a challenge, an issue, a situation that needs resolving. And that conflict should not be simple. It should not be something that your characters can ordinarily resolve with no problem whatsoever. Like, I don't know, putting on shoes or breathing or blinking or something very, very low difficulty, very, very common, very, very ordinary. You want that challenge to be difficult far more than that challenge to be rare, because a difficult challenge takes time and space in a story to resolve. And there's always that risk of, I don't know if the heroes can do this. I don't know if they can pull it off. And it's that question and that possibility of challenge that makes a story more engaging. Not just, gosh, how are they going to, what do they need to do to solve these problems? Because that's just, again, you just being creative and showing off. But it's more a matter of, what is the challenge of this book? What is the challenge of this story? What problem or conflict or crisis is happening to make these characters have to deal with it? Like, do we have to go across the country and fight the dragon? Do we have to throw the jewelry in the volcano? Do we have to, stop the fascists from containing the magic religion box? Do we need to, kick the blonde kid in the face at the sports tournament? Like, what's the conflict, and how is it just past the comfort zone and skill and knowledge and ability of our characters now, so that they can grow and develop, not just gain new shit, but transform and improve as people to ultimately reach that goal. If you start with those fundamentals, notice I didn't talk about how, like, you have to start this scene with this and you have to have that, because it doesn't matter the words on the page at this level. The fundamentals come down to how you organize your idea and build your relationship to the story and to the reader, no matter what you're writing. Those are the fundamentals to focus on, no matter the book. What a great question. Question number 2. What are some things to think about when deciding between a scene change and a chapter change? I love this question. Of course, I like the last question too, but this question's totally different than the first question, and it lets us engage in a different kind of discussion when it comes to moving from one idea to the next. Now, most of the time, you're going to see advice on the internet talking about how a chapter change has to happen when a set of scenes is done and you have nothing else to do. When in doubt, move chapters. This is not automatically bad advice. It's okay. Like, yeah, sure. It's just sort of the normal process for moving from chapter to chapter. But you can't apply that idea to something smaller than a chapter, because the rules, they're not even rules. The ideas, the guidelines for moving from scene to scene involve far more than a chapter. A chapter is a container. It's just a box, and we can put any number of things in this box. Some boxes, based on how they're constructed, can hold more than other boxes based on how they're constructed. But if we have a billion small things and they're small enough, we can fit them in any size box. But a scene change is about relationship. A scene change is about one set of information leading to or feeding into or going into something else, not just chronology, like we do this scene in the morning and that scene in the afternoon, though that is a relationship. But the more significant relationships, the more detailed relationships are not necessarily only chronological. Like a scene where I say I have to go to the store, and then a scene of me driving to the store. Sure, we can look at that sequentially or chronologically. One thing has to happen after the other. But there's also a level of relationship in there, in the sense of, like, I set a goal in one scene and I do something about it in the next scene. When you are crafting a relationship between events in a story, look for a scene change. When you are packaging up a set of scenes or a set of ideas that already have a relationship and it's time to advance on a bigger scale, move chapters. That's the easiest way, because again, at some level this gets really, really specific to what you're writing, because sometimes a scene will cross chapters. Like you'll have a scene interrupted so that you can turn to the next chapter because you want to hold that tension over, right? Like a cliffhanger or something. So there isn't like a hard and fast rule that says a chapter must have this many scenes and nothing else, and a scene can only have this. All those things go out the window. None of that's accurate. They can be of whatever size, whatever shape, whatever color and texture and flavor and whatever else. But when we are developing relationships between events or decisions or actions or story elements, look for a scene change. When we have containers or multiple scenes packaged together that already have an existing relationship or existing relationships, and it's time to move from one box to another, move chapters. Other than that, any other rule is going to eventually ultimately lead you to kind of tripping over your own 2 feet. Because if we get this any crunchier and we make this any more specific, you start running the risk of having your chapters sort of dictate the story as opposed to the other way around. And what I mean by that is, once you start looking at chapters with some kind of rigidity, all my chapters have to be 5 pages, all my chapters have to have 2 scenes, you stop thinking about, well, what's the natural flow of my story? And you start thinking about, like, churning it out at the widget factory. 2 scenes, chapter, boom. 2 scenes, chapter, boom. Over and over and over. When sometimes it might be to your advantage in the story to take 3 scenes and put them together in a chapter because they're set up, because it's the intro to your story. And we don't have to race and we don't have to rush. And we're just laying stuff out so that we can pick up speed later. And maybe your climax stretches across multiple chapters because you have, like a whole intergalactic war between spaceships and aliens and who knows what. So rather than have just one giant chapter, we have lots of short chapters because we're jumping in and out. We're following this crew and that ship and this plane and this thing and this guy and this person on the planet. Those divisions aren't, they're not the fences that the Raptors test. They're rough borders on a map. There's not necessarily an exact line. It's sort of a squiggly line written in a dry erase marker that we can, wipe off with our thumb and readjust. Scene changes, though, do get a little bit more rigid, but even that rigidity is abstract because we're saying, here's an idea. Now it's going to relate to this second idea or third idea or fifth idea or whatever. And the relationship needs to be understood. But beyond that, the size of those two elements, it could be anything. But scenes are about relationships, chapters are containers. Take that piece of advice, and I hope it clarifies and moves things along for you. If not, and you're watching this or listening to this, let me know, and I'll take another swing at your question. Question number 3: how can I fix weak dialogue? Now, when I got this question, I had not yet started any of the books I've been editing the last couple days. And I thought, well, this is going to be a great question. We'll just talk about like general weaknesses in dialogue because there's a couple we can always go to no matter what. And then I started editing these books. And then I started taking apart scenes and looking at constructions of stuff. And the dialogue is definitely, at least for several of these books, definitely a real big problem. And there's a number of reasons why it's a problem, but it mostly comes down to two factors. And these are the two I want to bring up in terms of how to fix weakness in dialogue. One, the dialogue has a very unnatural sound to it. So if you read it out loud, it doesn't sound like people talking. Maybe because all the and the well and the huh and the and all those mouth sounds that we would over dramatically produce because we want to be like intense or funny or silly, and we're trying too hard to make the bad guy dialogue sound like a bad guy, or we're making the wholesome character seem golly gee shucks just too wholesome. When we're trying to unnaturally provoke sound, right? When we're just writing everything down like it's a transcript, we're misunderstanding what dialogue's there for. Dialogue is reaction. Dialogue is I say a thing because something happens. I say something because it's on my mind, and then you, hearing that or interacting with me, have your own response to what I said, which was caused by this thing that happened. So I edit a bad book, I say a thing about it, and you, having a regular human experience, turn to me and go, "Wow, John sounds however you think John sounds," and then we continue talking about it. When your dialogue is unnatural, and when I say sounds unnatural, I'm not necessarily talking about hearing. It's not really about like the act of vibrating the bone in the ear or something. I'm talking about it doesn't seem like things regular human beings would say. I know they're in a book. I know they're made up. I know you have wizards and superpowers and robot suit guys and all this stuff. I get it. I hear you. But that doesn't like excuse or undo the idea that like these are people. They're people that again, like we talked about with that first question, the reader's going to relate to. So if they're not relating to them, one of the ways we can relate to them is having characters sound like people. So you don't have to over articulate all those little mouth sounds and all those little asides and everything because people generally don't sound like that. They do in fiction when we're watching, cartoons and the very mustached villain does dramatic mustache villain things and we want to be a little silly cuz it's a cartoon. But again, if we're just watching two people talk, it needs to sound like two people talking. Another point of weakness, another significant point of weakness, is how much people say when they talk to each other. I don't know if this is just a people don't stop and think of it kind of thing, or if there's some kind of greater issue that I'm missing the boat on. But one of the problems that really separates structured, good, effective dialogue from the weak stuff that just seems to take forever is that characters are really extra wordy, far wordier than they need to be. And I'm not talking like here is the monologue where the character is going to lay out their heart and soul because they're talking about something that's specific to them, like we shall fight them here and we shall, rally and defend our land. Like I'm not talking about big monologues. I'm talking about like casual day-to-day conversation where character A turns to character B and goes, "Hey, did you see the game last night?" And we move story along in a very natural way. Characters don't talk as much as we give them an attempt to in text. There's it's interesting because one of the most common problems with a really poorly shaped draft is that there's so much talking, like the quantity of words and the number of times characters talk. It's more or less like you've pictured some kind of weird screenplay and then periodically stitched together description sentences around all the talking. And really that's backwards. There should be stitched together dialogue in between long sections of exposition because we're trying to, again, like we talked about in the first question, get the reader to imagine a whole story, not just the sound, not just the people talking. I know one of the influences here is television, media, visual media, where people can pop the captions on and they can watch their favorite anime. And anime is not life. It is still animated. It is still subject to a different set of rules and a different set of how things are set up. And it's a cartoon, so it's subject to cartoon physics. And some of the emotion and the emoting isn't the same as humans because they're cartoon people. You can't take that one-to-one relationship. I think one of the things I regret in teaching a very cinematic style is that people take a hold of cinema and they think they can just replicate it on the page, and they're missing several steps along that way. My fault for that. I own that mistake. But that weak dialogue where everybody's just talking so much, and I don't mean talking out of like, oh my God, I'm so nervous. I have to keep talking so that this other person doesn't get bored with me. That's a legit thing that happens. That's a human experience. But how you want to replicate that is not by trying to quote the character verbatim. It's a synthesis between I'm going to say so the character is going to have some dialogue to say some things because they also have feelings that we're expressing not in dialogue to go along with the idea. So, to summarize this point, weak dialogue has a particular natural sound. If you can't go out your front door and encounter other humans, not people on the internet, not people in Discord or on Facebook or chats or whatever else, but human beings, mammals, speaking mammals, if you can't go out into the world and see the pacing and the cadence and the structure of dialogue in the real world, if you couldn't picture two regular folks saying your dialogue out word for word, sound for sound, that's a real big problem. And two, the quantity of talking. They don't have to say so much in order to get across their point, or in order to be relatable, or in order to demonstrate that, oh, I'm the funny character, or I'm the one with the troubled backstory and the abs. Like, you don't have to. Talking isn't gonna carry all that narrative load. There's just no need to. Start there by going at your dialogue and figuring out how to change its sound. And then after that, then go after and figure out like, well, what do they talk about? Because that's going to be a reaction to what's been happening around relative to them. They're not going to go, hey, I know we're in the middle of like this car chase, but let me tell you about, my aunt and my grandma and the bad thing that happened to us all when I was 11. Because you're in a car chase. The current situation is going to dominate the character's perspective because it's just the thing going on. Pay attention to the moment. You don't have to like have everybody talk about everything all the time like it's a really bad television episode. It's not. It's a different animal entirely. But start with the sound and start with the quantity and work from there. Now, chat. I wasn't ignoring you. I didn't mean to ignore you. I apologize. Hi, chat. How are you? I hope you're doing well. It is wonderful to see you. Thank you ever so much for being here. It really and truly means the world. So, anybody here have any questions about anything? There's quite a few people here. Wow. Thanks for being here. Um, you're about to ask me what I'm drinking today. It's all water. I'm saving a root beer. It's in the fridge downstairs. Um, After chat, once I send off a few of the books I just finished, because this morning was the like foot gas pedal high speed get a lot done. I'll send those off today. I'll send more off tomorrow, and then it's root beer time, and then we're done. John's brain will unplug, and I don't know, veg or something. Just oof, turn into a pile of leaves and diminish into the west for a few hours. Man, questions, anybody? Shall we keep moving? Yeah, let's keep moving. Question number 4. I see a lot of writers using AI to outline their books. How are they doing that? Okay, delightful. Let's see if we can get you some answers. One, AI is garbage. It's a theft machine. It's a plagiarism tool and device. It does not expedite the process. And all those tools like that promise high productivity are fundamentally opposed to creativity. So anytime you see an ad or anything promoting like you can do whatever it is faster and better and easier, I want you in your head to hear that the more they preach productivity, the less they give a shit about creativity. These people are not creative. They abhor creativity, and they think that if you can just be productive and have a creative thing shortcut for you, you'll get to the more important good part, because they're assholes who don't care about art. They want to make product. And that's not how we improve as like a society, a civilization, a species, um, existent things with any kind of like soul, if that's your jam or anything like that. Like all AI is going to do is contribute to the further destruction of everything, whether that's the electrical system or fossil fuels or anything. AI is part of what's accelerating us to hell in a handbasket. Now, that said, there are some people, despite all great sense in their heads, that they're using AI to outline their book. And really, what they're doing is they're asking a plagiarism device to steal bits and pieces of other people's already completed work and then scotch taping it together like a homebrew ransom note. I'm going to clip these words out of this magazine and those words out of that newspaper and this word out of this, and I'm going to call it my own. That's how they're doing that. Now, granted, yes, it comes all on a website in a nice, neat, pretty text. But where do you think that source material came from? This isn't data from Star Trek. We are not asking, Mrs. Roddenberry's disembodied voice to regurgitate us some fact. This isn't, some greater supernatural mega being that we've somehow convinced to exist in liminal hammer space. This is stolen material regurgitated back to us. And it's done because people are fundamentally incurious and lazy. That's how they're doing it. They are looking at other people's plots, scotch taping them, taking a pair of scissors to them, trimming them out, scotch taping them together, maybe changing one or two words so it feels like they did something, and then putting it together. Frankenstein 2, Victor. Yes, yes. Victor commits copyright infringement, and then the strike of lightning is what imbues their remade monster to life. Yeah, it's hot garbage. Don't do that. Do better. Do like super duper much better. On we go. Question 5. Who determines the trends for book covers? Okay. This is going to sound a little weird, but let me see if I can explain this in a way that makes sense. The trend for a book cover is unclear until it isn't. So it starts like this. At some point in traditional publishing spaces, there's a rough idea of like something artistic, some picture somebody has in their head. And it's very loose. And sometimes they're great at sort of spelling it out and saying, I'm looking for a book cover that has these things. And they go to their art people, or they start, going through the internet and finding like, make it look like this, something like that. This process will happen. Let's try this. Let's make it look like this. I think the book should look like this, because it's still a decision ultimately made by one person at some point, whether that's a publisher, an art director, somebody. Once that happens for, let's say, 10 books, 10 separate books have 10 separate covers. The trend is based on whichever one of these books sells well. Doesn't matter what the book is. Doesn't matter how many other books came out at roughly the same time. It's the popular traditional seller that dictates a trend. Why? Well, in part, it's because for some reason people still lean on traditional publishing as sort of like the taste maker. Whatever the big corporation is doing, that's where we have to look, because we've been traumatized, bullied, and abused into believing the corporations are the start and the be all and the end all. But that's how we end up with stuff like, um, remember that stretch of book title habits where it's like the X of Y, and then it becomes part of a series? Or everybody had a colon in there for a while, the X of Y colon adjective adjective. And or everybody's cover had like a different heraldry, like a different shield for a different like group of people in the story. And that's because those books sold well. And other people said to themselves, gosh, that book is selling really well, whatever the hell it is, no matter whether that book is good or bad or whatever. But that book is selling well, and I want my book to sell well. So I should make my book in some way appear similar to the book that sells well, to sort of associate my book with this other well-selling thing to help my book out. Likewise, this is also true of story ideas. Well, that book about such and such and so is selling well. So if I take some of those elements and kind of file the serial numbers off and put them in mine, then I can say I'm a lot like that other book that's also doing well. So if you like that book, you'll like my book. And then they go from there. But the trend is sales derived. Somebody at some point made a decision. I want to see smoke, roses, skulls, thorns, sunrises, sunsets, boats, shadows, silhouettes, big muscled dudes in unbuttoned shirts, whatever. Those came from the fact that somebody made a decision once. It turned out that the book that the cover was attached to sold well. And then loads of other people decided to do it too. That's where the book cover trend comes from. Right. Like after Twilight, vampire stories were everywhere. Same concept. Oh my God, if I'm a regular plain person and I meet a supernatural being and I fall in love, that must be the same formula. It's the same thing. Happens all the time. Happens oodles of places. On we go. Question 6. Why are so many writer newsletters so similar? In like, I'm assuming they mean in terms of like visual appearance as opposed to content. Laziness, just straight up laziness. Again, like we just talked about with book covers, it's the idea of I see other people like, um, I see other people doing it this way and they're doing well. So if I do it that way, I'll do it well as well. And uh, if we just make a template out of it, we can speed through. Because again, remember, we're swapping creativity for productivity. So newsletters end up just getting churned out, like super churned out. And they all end up looking roughly the same. Here's a title, here's an image, here's a caption, here's a subheading, here's the content, here are some links, and we're out. I'm guilty of it too. But I think it's about tempering that expectation, that homogenization of ideas. Well, everybody does it this way, so I'll do it that way too. And it's also the sort of idea of these are the tools we work with, as great or as weak as they might be. But it ends up being a case of like, well, what are the successful people doing? And I want to emulate that. Now, somebody asked in chat where these questions are coming from. Here's where they come from. A couple different places. One, people send me questions. They email them. They send me a ton of tweets. They ask them in other chats. They ask them in coaching. They ask me a question from somewhere, and I write them down, and they go sit in a list, and then I turn them into graphics. Two, uh, people straight up suggest them. Hey, you know, in a session or just randomly. Hey, next week, could you talk about whatever a thing is? And we'll either form a question based on the topic they want to talk about, or I will dig through and find a question. But they come from writers who have questions. If you have them, just ask them. And then I grab 13 of them at a time. Sometimes I visit an old question. That's one of those is coming up soon. But mostly these questions are asked by people who have questions. They ask them in all kinds of spaces. Thanks for asking. On we go. Does anybody have any questions now that we're talking about questions? I decidedly need more water. Questions about anything? Shall we keep going? On we go. Question 7. Is there a difference between saving individual chapters as files and saving one big giant manuscript? Yes. As opposed to, like, the obvious one is one's a bunch of separate files and one's a big single file. Past that, there's a huge, there's several different things happening here. One, if you are saving individual chapters, then the changes you make just live in a little space. So let's say you're writing and we're going along and everything's going great, but chapter 10 is a mess for whatever reason. Doesn't matter. But let's say chapter 10 is just garbage in a box. Then you working on chapter 10 by itself sort of separates and isolates it from all the other stuff. And it allows you just to focus on that. And from a coaching editing perspective, being able just to swap a few pages back and forth can be infinitely easier to deal with than let's go attach the big giant file where the first 500 pages or notes or ideas or whatever, and we have to scroll down and scroll down and scroll down and sort of keep track of everything. The other side of it, I'm making a face. The other side of this is that sometimes when we change a thing in isolation, we sort of forget about the ripple effect. So if we end up really rewriting the hell out of chapter 10, we got to think about the references that are no longer valid or accurate way back in chapter 2, chapter 5, or whatever, as well as the stuff going forward. So saving one big giant manuscript, which at some point you're going to have to do because when you go submit this for traditional publishing or even go submit this, to get this thing made into a book, you want to upload one single file. But the the advantage of working on it in pieces allows you to focus. And saving one big file can feel like a big accomplishment. Look how big and giant my thing is. Oh my God, it's all my stuff. But at the same time, if you're somebody who gets really anxious or prickly around the idea of like word count and stuff, it can be a real pain in the neck because you'll start looking at your whole book and go, oh my God, I've got 130,000 words, let's say. And for some reason, you've got it in your head that you're only supposed to have like 80,000 at most, which is whatever. We'll deal with that when the bridge comes. But that pressure to write to the number as opposed to telling the story can be a real problem for a lot of writers. So I would advise this, and I do advise this. If you aren't, how do we let's say it positively rather than negatively. When you're getting started, with a new project or some new ideas, do it in pieces. And then stitch and paste those pieces together when the pieces are done. It's it's gonna work better. And then once everything is done, then go back and hammer, like, smooth out the rough edges in the main manuscript. But when you're just in that early creating phase, do it in pieces. It's gonna make your life a lot easier, because you can also then isolate where the problems are and what you want to fix and what you want to tweak, and you won't have to worry about, like, moving this massive thing around and trying to change like two parts. That is my advice to you. On we go. Question 8. Do the really obvious questions on social media annoy me? Annoy? No. Irritate and bother? Yeah, because it tells me two things. One, that nobody nobody's really coming around and supporting them, because otherwise they'd have the answer already and they just wouldn't know. Like, they wouldn't have to ask if people were just like, yeah, it's you just information, here you go. And two, it's the fact that some of these things just keep coming up. I don't always understand where they come from, but why we ask so frequently about something fairly straightforward says way more to me about the support we give one another, as opposed to the answer or disagreement we may have about a thing, like semicolons and em dashes. They're If you were to look at the discourse around the questions, you'd think, oh my God, the world's going to come to an end if we don't get a definitive answer on semicolons and em dashes. And at the end of the day, it's a semicolon, it's a piece of punctuation, whatever, shrug and move on. What annoys me, if there's any part of this that annoys me, is that people mistake and people perpetuate the idea that asking these questions is somehow good or bad. Like this. So let's say you're brand new or newish, and you ask some straightforward questions. You want to know about pen names. You want to know about formatting. You want to know about how to fix a plot, or how to write this kind of scene. Straightforward stuff, normal stuff, whatever. If you get a wealth of very different answers, do it this way, do it that way, no, don't do that at all, that kind of thing, it comes down to, well, which answer gets the most likes or the most upvotes or the most clicks or the most thises or the most that's, because the more popular answer must therefore be the right one. And it's not. You got to do what works best for you. And if you need to dig in and get crunchier answers or better detail, then you have to take that extra step and do it. And if you get 5 answers that are all very different and you don't like any of them, okay, go find a sixth answer. What annoys me about it is that that's sort of just the climate that persists, as opposed, because everybody's got a system, right? Everybody knows, like, oh, well, this is how I did it. I did this and I did that. Okay. Help people rather than shill your shit. It's not that the obvious question exists. It's that the obvious question doesn't immediately get, like, conscientiously positively assisted. That's what bugs me. These are regular people, nervous and new, asking big, scary questions. And instead, we funnel them off to the same 5 Google answers and the same, like, well, just chime in with what kind of coffee your character would take, or what's a gif of somebody who would play your main character. None of those things are going to help somebody who wants to know how to write a car chase. But let's spend our time doing that because it feels like helping. That's the stuff that bugs me the most. I want people asking more questions, but I also want better answers. And therein lies my great frustration. I want people to not jump to, like, oh, well, I did this and I did that, but, like, break it down and use some, like, okay, so you've got a character and the character structure looks like this, and here are 2 beats that exemplify this. Like, if we all have the same tools, we can all help each other build loads of different things. It's a thing, and it can be learned and trained and improved, as opposed to spiraling off into vapidity about dumb things that don't really matter. Writing is an incredible anomaly where it simultaneously has a ton of rules but no rules at all. Yeah, ish, mostly. Sure, I'll agree to that. It is a rare thing where no matter what you bring up, there's a way to make it work in the opposite direction. Yes, mostly so. Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. Um, it's got a lot of guidelines and a lot of abstraction, but also a lot of crunch at the same time. And it's about balancing and tempering all those things together in your own way. It's less structured than something mechanical, and it's less abstract than something completely imaginative, where it just lives in our heads and there's no concrete like creative process. We're just improving it in our brains out loud. It's it's one of those arts that kind of sits at the center of several overlapping or intersecting Venn diagrams. Now, why is that blinking? Oh, okay. Pressing the button. Question 9. Should I be thinking about vertical video and audiograms for my books? No, no, no. Here's where this question comes from. So there was a thing that came out a couple days ago about how Time Warner Discovery encouraged the people at Game of Thrones to create or consider creating episodes shot and framed in like narrower screen margins to account for people like watching clips on their phone. And vertical video right now is a really hot button issue in like really constructed productivity tech pro spaces because here's this software that allows you to turn your podcast into vertical video even though it wasn't video before, or vertical video is the new hot thing because everybody's on their phone, and audiograms are sort of the audio leading clip that you see on Instagram and TikTok and all that stuff, as if that's supposed to be the primary delivery and absorption device for your readership. And eventually, somehow, we're all supposed to be engaging with that stuff as opposed to like reading the book. I think this is one of those things where you get an author worrying about step like 35 in the process when they're on step 2. If you're in the middle of writing your book, like we're not done our first draft yet, or we've just started our second draft, like we are early days, focus there, get that done. Don't sweat the, oh my God, what about the vertical integration of my newsletter audience? No. Are those other things important? Yes. Do they matter? Yes. But they're not going to matter if you can't write the first draft of the book. It won't matter if you think about vertical video for your marketing strategy when we haven't finished the book. You got to finish the book first. Otherwise, we're sort of left in this space where you've mapped out definitely, positively, absolutely how something is going to go, except those are the later steps in the marathon and we haven't left the starting gate. We haven't moved first forward. You need to write the book. My old Twitter header way back was just write the fucking thing. Well, write the effing thing, but it was still the idea of like that's job number one. And if you want to occupy yourself with the marketing stuff, but you haven't written the book, marketing doesn't matter. You can't market a thing that does not exist. All you can do is build hype, but you still have to deliver on that hype. Go finish the book. It will make a difference. And then figure out, okay, so I've got this thing, I've made this thing, what do I do with it? That's where we start talking about vertical video and audiograms and podcasting and newslettering and snippets and all this other stuff. But it's not going to matter if you don't have the book done. Yes, the worst story ever written is better than the best story never finished. I cannot. Um, I there was an unlisted video on my YouTube channel that basically boiled down to just my answer to everything was write the book, write the book, write the book and find out, write the book and find out, write the chapter and find out. Um, I don't. I think it's still up. It might be. whatever. It's also, there's a couple different versions of that idea floating around a lot on my podcasting and stuff. But yes, you have to write the book. Nothing else is going to matter if the book doesn't become a book. All right. Questions? Yes, no? Shall we keep going? Let's go. Question 10. Should there be a potato test for authors? If you don't know what the potato test is, it's in a lot of spaces it's how you test against a bot. So let's say there's a meme floating around social media where somebody, it's a dating app or something, and two people are having some kind of chat back and forth, and um, the one person wants to, say potato to the other person to make sure that they're a real person who's reading the text so that they can have an actual person to person conversation, as opposed to like the very canned, fabricated statements that the second person is making. So the first person is like, say potato, say potato, say potato. And the second person's just a bot following a script, and it ends with, say potato, because it's the idea of like, how do I know you're a real person? How do I know I'm having a legit experience with you? How am I engaging with you and you're not a scripted coded thing? So this question here is about a potato test for authors, because there's some discourse circling right now, like the last 24-ish hours, about stuff like, if you read a certain thing, you must have a porn addiction, or if you don't have a degree, you're not a real writer, or if you read this book and that book, two books the person in question doesn't like, then you're a bad writer or whatever. Like there's always some kind of gatekeeper. There's always some kind of criteria for quality set by somebody else that you have to like impress or curry the favor of in order to be good enough. I'm making air quotes, good enough. Um, and that's why a potato test for authors won't really work, because we're all different. I don't know if you know this, but we're all incredibly different from one another. And in many, many ways, many of us are similar through, in less considered things. We share a lot in common. We have the ability to share even more in common. And we also have experiences that are isolating and separating. And that's all part of life too. And if you're looking for those like real authors with their real, making air quotes all the time, talent and their real books, what you're looking for is somebody crafting a story, whatever kind of story, that moves you and affects you, which means you need to figure out the sort of thing that does move and affect you, as opposed to just, taking somebody else's word for it. I don't think, every time I see the debate about real authorship or real writing, I immediately assume the person bringing the issue up is not doing any of those things. Because if they did, they wouldn't be framing it in terms of real or valid or legit. They would instead be talking about how to write better than they are. Because real and valid and legit are judgments placed on one thing by somebody else, but the vulnerability of writing, the art of writing, the really critical, juicy, messy bits are expressions of who and what we are, how we see the world, how we want to see the world. And you can't really gatekeep that in some kind of arbitrary good enough, not good enough experience, because it's really variable. And it's supposed to be, because it's art. So no, there should not be a potato test for authors, though it would be really nice to like encounter other authors that are themselves not overly scripted and overly manufactured productions of things. Like, you don't have to tuck your shirt in. You can put your feet and elbows on the table and you can just be a person engaging with the rest of the world. It's not about performing the tasks or the artifice of the role of the author as you've come to understand it. It's about being a person who is expressing their existence through something they're creating, which requires vulnerability, some kind of emotional maturity, and a willingness to grow. Maybe that is a potato test. I don't know. But don't don't turn it into a gatekeepery thing. No good will come from it. On we go. Oh, question 11. What's the worst part about writing communities? I saw this question and I struggled with an answer because a writing community can have many problems with it. It can be too big, it can be too small, it can be too ego trippy, it can be too cliquish, loads of different things like that. But I think the worst, if we must prioritize a thing, I think too many writing communities are incredibly passive. You know, they'll have a huge population, a huge number of people in the group, signed up, whatever, and very, very few contributing people. Now, they might have different reasons for doing so. It might be a sense of nerves, or it might be cliquishness, or there might be some other underlying issue. But I think for me, the worst part about it is that you'll get 100, 200, however many people, and then five people, six people, 10 people maybe will really do all the day-to-day interacting, which is great for those 10 people. Good for them. That's awesome. But what are the other 100 plus people getting? Like, other than reading, hopefully, the interactions of these other folks, like what are they doing there? This is a community should be not mandatory participation, but the climate and the culture of the community should encourage participation. Hey, what do you think, new people? You came here for help. You came here to learn. You came here to get an answer. You came here to get supported. How can that happen? What needs to exist that maybe doesn't, or that you need to be made aware of, or what needs improvement? Like, this is your chance to be a part of a thing that is actively improving you, that you can tangibly and directly benefit from. I've never understood, and I deal with it on a weekly basis. I've never understood like those huge communities of people who just sit there. I come into a space and I go, "Hey, does anybody have any questions about anything?" Just like this, only in text as opposed to me talking. And and crickets. I don't get it. I don't understand. I've really efforted in the last 5 years to be less intimidating. So it's not. I don't think it's a me thing. But I don't understand joining a thing, or being a part of a thing, or saying you want to be a part of a thing and then not doing something about it. Now, maybe somebody pointed this out to me yesterday. Maybe this is a lot like signing up for newsletters, and you want that information so that maybe one day, not today, but like in the future, in the nebulous unknown down the road future, maybe one day I'll chime in. I guess, but people kick that can down the road an awful lot. I've never quite understood it. It's always been a little off to me. So I would say the worst part about a writing community is the passivity. Question 12. How do I avoid getting discouraged by the lack of responses to my social media posts? This is something I most definitely struggle with. So today, for instance, I post early that, hey, there's a writer's chat today. And I send the post out, and, there's no typos. It's got graphic. It's got some alt text attached to it. Like, I've done everything I can think to do. It's got hashtags. It's doing all the things. And like two people like it, and maybe one or two people, not counting me, share it. That can be discouraging. Absolutely, that can be discouraging. You can feel like you're talking to the wall, because we want, on some level, because we're trained by these systems, we connect high engagement with quality. Oh my God, 10 people like it. This must be really good. And it can be very discouraging to go the opposite way and go, nobody's seeing my thing. Nobody's clicking this link. Nobody cares. It must not be worth my time. I must therefore be making things that suck. I am therefore not a good maker or doer of things. And that's where the discouragement sort of snowballs, rolls downhill. It sucks. It sucks a lot. One of the best ways I have found to sort of push back against this discouragement is instead of waiting for those people to like jump in and be active and, celebrate, oh my God, there's a chat. Oh my God, there's this book I can buy, whatever it is, to think about it in terms of, that old cartoon idea of like a person puts a message in a bottle on a little island where it's just them and a palm tree, and they put the note in the bottle and they chuck the bottle into the ocean and it goes away. And maybe somebody somewhere, will get the bottle with the note in it on the other side. I think it's better, more and more lately, especially, to think about your posts as messages in bottles, which is inherently slightly more negative than I used to be about social media. But you're catching me on a day where I'm tired, and such is the state of the world, where if we go into the interaction, instead expecting like everybody's, poised on the edge of their seat waiting for my every word, if instead we go to, I'm just going to lob this out there, whatever it is whatever it is. As frustrating as that might be, as critically needed as a response might be. Like if you look at somebody who's asking for, like, could I please have $5 for food or something? Or I really need a job. Does anybody have any leads or something? Or I really need a home for whatever reason. Like those things can be very discouraging to get no response to, because it feels like you'll never get out of the situation that prompted you to write the thing in the first place. But since this isn't going to be the only time you ask this thing, and since you are not limited in the number of ways and places and times you can ask, this individual instance of asking is a note in a bottle. And yeah, if you keep throwing the same note in the same ocean over and over and over again, eventually, yes, just by sheer math and numbers, somebody on the other end will see it. But if we vary up our notes, if we change the way we throw those notes into the ocean, if we change the ocean we throw the notes in, you increase the likelihood of getting a response back. That discouragement comes from an expectation. You can temper that expectation by remembering that A, you're in control of the distribution of your notes, and B, once you get it out there, it's out of your hands. Staring at the screen and refreshing a million times does not suddenly encourage somebody to engage with it. I get it. It feels like you're doing something every time you hit refresh, but it's up to other people once it leaves you. And that's on them, not you. At least that's what I've been telling myself. And it's helped a little. Not as much as I would like, but it's helped a little. I hope it helps you. On we go to our super last question of the day. Question number 13. What do I do if I'm so overwhelmed by everything, I guess, that I can't really write at all? Okay, let's run through the checklist. Are you in a position where you are physically safe from harm? Are you in a position or a place where your basic needs of food, shelter, and hydration are met? Are you in a position where your basic needs are met along with your immediate emotional needs of love and support? This is where things get a little shaky. But if you can meet the majority of those needs and you're in that position, focus on them and focus on getting those basics in line. You got to meet your basics before we can start getting creative, before we can start putting dopamine back in the system, because otherwise it's just going to burn too quickly. There's a lot happening in the world. Very little of it is good, depending on how you want to, what you choose to focus on and the degree on which you choose to focus. The we can spend a lot of time being very aggressive in how bad it is. If you've been here before, you've heard me talk with a number of solutions as to how to fix things, and that's all nice, well, and good, but it still never really gets around to answering this kind of question, which is, okay, so there's all this stuff that needs to happen. The world is a dumpster fire. We can change this, and this needs to happen, and there's that. How do I write? At the heart of everything, once independent from and separate from your basic needs and your basic emotional requirements for existence, At the heart of everything, you have to retain some hope. Hope in something. Hope that it will pass. Hope that you can get through today. Hope that tomorrow you will find a dollar on the ground. Hope that you will, the temporary feeling you're having will move swiftly. Hope that, something good will happen in the future. Hope that changing all the things that are existentially crushing you can abate. You have to maintain that ember of hope, because it is from that ember of hope that your art will thrive. Because if we just let everything get squashed, if we just sit here and go, oh my God, everything's a problem, I don't have this, I don't have that, this is a problem, that's a problem, we're never getting anywhere. And nothing's going to change other than we'll just become progressively more miserable. But if we hold that hope and we say, okay, I've got all these needs and all these problems, but there's something I can do for me that nobody can take away, that nobody can erode, that I'm not going to let other people come in and snuff out. I'm doing this for me because it brings me pleasure. Because no matter what, no matter how bad the state of everything is, you're allowed to have pleasure in your life. You're a human being. You deserve it. So find those moments, because they do happen. You might not feel like it because the bad stuff seems really bad, but that doesn't dismiss the fact that they are available to you. You have to let yourself experience them. Even if it's something like, oh man, that mouthful of water I just had was really great. Or I spent 2 minutes watching a video about, a guy trying to make it like a cake or something, and the dogs were constantly eating it. It was very amusing. Or I spent, 5 minutes and I cleaned the lint out of the lint trap and now my socks are all warm. Find some kind of pleasure that you can use to regularly fuel the ember of hope that your life is not doomed and fated to collapse in the same way that everything else seems to be. If you can regularly stoke that hope and regularly find those moments of pleasure, writing can be an outlet for those feelings. It can also be an outlet for the feelings of frustration. But writing and creating something for you first and foremost, before anything else, well ahead of anything else, is a more productive use for growing that hope and relieving that tension. So when somebody tells me like, oh, I can't seem to write at all, very, very rarely do I encounter somebody who is literally unable to write one word. It happens. It's a thing. But usually what they're talking about is, I can't write at length. I can't write in big giant blocks of text like I used to back in the day, or whatever other anecdote they have. In those cases where depression or mental health crisis or whatever else has absolutely overwhelmed you for the day, you have to retreat. You got to take a step back. You got to protect yourself, defend yourself, take care of yourself to the best of your ability. And writing can wait, because you gotta meet those basics. You gotta take care of yourself. It won't matter what else you do. You gotta take care of yourself. But if having done that, then it's time to stoke and fuel those fires that will get you through the next minute, hour, day, week, whatever. And one of those things that's going to bring more fuel to your fire is reducing your expectations on yourself. Not because you're unworthy, not because you're not good enough, not because it's wrong of you to think that you're capable. It's just that if you set too high and too inflexible an expectation, it's not going to go the way you want or the way you need. You don't have to rigidly hold yourself to some like mega impossible standard for reasons. Sit down and write. Just write. Write a sentence, write a word. Any new thing that hits a page is a victory. It's as much a victory at one word as it is at 10 words, as it is 1,000 words. And it might not be enough. You might have a want for more, but you have to write based on what you're capable of, where you're at the moment. If we were talking about non-writing things, if we were talking about food, you might be very hungry, but we only have this one spoonful. So we take the spoonful and we go from there. We might only have one sentence, but it's one sentence we didn't have before. We write it and we get it down and we move on. later, some nebulous later down the road, not, we don't have to plan for it right this second, but at some later, circumstances can potentially be different. And those are the times we'll take advantage of the writing. Those are the times we'll take advantage of those flames and embers of hope. Those are the times where we will do something significant. But for now, just stoke the fire. 1 word, 2 words, 5 words, 10 words, a paragraph. And that has to be enough. I know it doesn't feel enough compared to other things in the past or the potentially unknown in the future, but we just have it right here in front of us. If you're really, really overwhelmed, go meet your basics. Focus there. Writing can wait. If this is more of um, a melodramatic kind of overwhelm, where your basics are definitely met, and you're not really worried about that, you're just sort of like locked up in your own head via social media or whatever else. And it's still a problem, but it's nowhere like you're unhoused and worried about how you're going to survive the next 2 hours in the cold or whatever. Then what you have to focus on are finding the small things that will inject some kind of pleasure and dopamine into you and hold on to them. And then when we're feeling a little bit more stable, start writing small with lower expectations and build from there. That's how you do that. So now, one last round. Questions, anybody? Question. Do you see many writers writing more than one manuscript at a time? Are they successful? Can it be done successfully? That's a great question. Yes, let's do this in pieces. I do see a lot of writers writing more than one thing at the same time. Maybe one day, if we divide the week up, they're doing half the week with this book and half the week with that book. Or maybe it's even down to the hour, like they spend 20 minutes here and 20 minutes there. Who knows? But yes, I do see writers writing more than one book at the same time, planning multiple books while writing one book, writing one multiple books while planning the next. Absolutely. Are they successful? Well, that's kind of a tricky question because I'm not quite sure what success you mean. If we're talking about success, like, do they complete the task at hand? Do they write all those books? Yes, some do. Are they financially successful? Like, do they publish those things? Some do. If success equals forward progress, yes, they are successful. It requires a little organization. It requires a little bit of discipline. It requires consistent effort, just the same it did if you're just doing one book at a time. But yeah, they can make forward progress. Granted, if you keep splitting yourself across multiple things at the same time, it's harder to make big giant leaps in progress because you're making lots of little steps everywhere instead of one big step somewhere. But yeah, you can make forward progress. It just takes organization. One of the factors that I want to bring up at that point for that question is sometimes it is a matter of chasing what you can do versus chasing what feels good. Because there are no stakes. There's no risk when we're just fully imagining the 15, 25, 35, however many things. I could do this story. I could do that story. It could have this. It could have that. Here's this thing here. Like if we're just thinking up how much we could think up, it's very easy to overcommit invisible resources to stuff because there's nothing stopping you. There's no limit. There's no ceiling. There's no boundary. We can just come up with 20 ideas for 20 stories, and we'll never make a lot of progress on most of them. But it feels good because we're making stuff up. The hard part is coming up. Okay, I've got 20 ideas for 20 stories. Figuring out how to transform that abstraction into something concrete is where you start seeing the organization and the discipline show up. Okay, I could go in 20 different directions. I'm just going to pick one. If you can pick one without having to stumble over, did I pick the right one? Is it a good one? Should I pick that one? You can just pick one and then begin. Discipline, structure, organization, all those other tools we normally talk about. Yeah, you will make a lot better progress more consistently, hopefully, than if you constantly just stay stalled, spiraling around. Oh my God, I have 20 ideas. What do I pick? Any of them. Again, no stakes, no ceilings, no danger. So any of them are the right choice. And then you treat it as though it's the only one you're doing at the time, even though you've got three others, even though we have three open Word docs or whatever, you're only ever doing one at a time. So just put the focus there. And that way, when it's time, okay, well, we're done this one, we can go over to book 2, we can go over to book 5, we can go over to idea number 9. Treat it as though it's the only one you're doing. Now, if that means, at the end of the day, after doing 8 things, we have very little time, energy, and focus for that ninth thing, well, that's the cost of doing 8 things in a day. Maybe tomorrow we'll just do 6. But yes, you can do this successfully. I'm wondering if it would help with the people dealing with I can't write. Maybe having something else to choose from helps lower the barrier for entry, or will it cause more issues? I'm hesitant to tell somebody, hey, I can't write. We'll go make a new idea. I'm hesitant for a couple reasons. One, I don't want to give the impression that you should just drop everything and always make a new idea, because a very common problem, unrelated to all those things, is an inability to finish stuff. I do not want to perpetuate a set of systems that encourages creation without finish. That's a thing, because you're preventing that sense of accomplishment, and you're not getting to the later steps that you think are that you want to, that are important. Do I think it's a good idea to just pick up and do something different where there's a lower barrier for entry and no risk? Yeah. I think there is something valuable there. I think there's the idea of like, I can't write today. Well, just make something up. Do something that absolutely doesn't matter, so that you're still flexing those muscles. You're still, using that creative effort. Yeah, there's something there. But I would be I don't want to call it like start a brand new second book, because I don't want people to leave that first one behind. That makes sense. I don't know if I'm clear on that. There's probably a podcast episode I could put together. That's a really good point. Let me write that. Where's my pen? Let's turn this into a podcast episode, because it's going to get long. Um, if I can't write, should I start something new? Yeah, let's. I've already got this week's podcasts put together, so let's make that Monday's podcast episode. That sounds awesome. Love that. All right. Yeah, I've got to think on that a little bit more. That's a really good question. It's a really interesting question. Yeah, that's a Monday podcast for sure. All right. Other questions? Else we will get out of here. It's a really good one. Thanks. Needed that. Oh, here we go. There are prompts that make me think of my characters and want to tell a story, but don't fit in my own story. You mean like fit in the story you're currently writing? Should I still write it? Yeah. I mean, not to the same degree. If I'm understanding your question correctly, you're saying you've got your existing story. It's going along, doing whatever it's doing. But then you encounter this new idea, right? And this new idea doesn't fit with the old idea, but it's a new idea all by itself. And you want to follow that new idea. Okay. If it's a very separate thing, right? Like where you're writing a sci-fi story and this idea for a romance novel pops in your head, let's say, something very, very different. That new idea is worth exploring, separate from the original idea. You don't always have, the point is, you don't always have to incorporate the new thing into your existing thing. Sometimes you can have separate things. Like, that's okay. I have this and I have that. I have my fantasy novel and I have this sci-fi story, or I have this fantasy novel and that other fantasy novel, or whatever. You don't have to suddenly fold it into the existing story. It's Here's an example. So I'm watching multiple television shows, obviously not at the same time, but like one show at a time. Sometimes I watch an episode of this, sometimes I watch an episode of that. I don't think about blending the two shows into one show. They're very different shows, but sometimes I watch that and sometimes I watch this other television show. They're separate and I get to choose where I put my time and focus. How do I write it without muddling the original idea? Well, if you really want to incorporate the new idea into the existing stuff, if anything's going to change, it's going to be the new stuff. Why? Because it has the least amount of baggage with it. You don't want to put yourself in a position where you're constantly changing your original idea to adapt to the new stuff, because it it will always change and never feel consistent. You want to turn that, you want to flip it around so that you're adapting the new stuff to the existing stuff. So here's my big giant fantasy novel. I read this I get this idea for a romance story. I can't radically undo my original story, but maybe I can turn this romance idea into a subplot. So what do I have to change? How much do I have to cut and trim and remove in order to get some part of what I like? Hopefully the core part of what I like folded into my new piece, or folded into my old work to make a new piece. I want to make an analogy for an immune system, right? Like, this new infection comes in, this new thing enters the bloodstream, and the immune system's job, in theory, is to adapt to it and incorporate its adapted new form into the existing bloodstream. It's a lot like that, where this new thing comes in and we don't rewrite everything to suit the new thing. We incorporate the new thing into the existence. And beyond that, you just write. Does that make sense? I'm not sure the immune system thing worked, but I think the idea worked. Good question. Any others before we get out of here? Oh, you're very welcome. You're super welcome. Thanks for asking that question. All right, let's get out of here, though. I want to thank every single person for being here. Thank you for all your questions, your contributions, your chat, your comments, your whatever. I hope I hope this helped. I hope this was good. This was good for me. It certainly improved the tenor of my day. Um, Thank you. Thanks everybody for being here. Thanks for checking this out. If you like this and you want to support more of it, head over to patreon.com/John helps you write better. And $2 a month is all it takes to make this stuff happen. $2. Come on, you got $2. Let's do it. And if you want to get me in your ears every day, more or less, wherever you get your podcasts, anywhere on this planet, go search for John helps you write better, and I'll be there in your ears. There's like loads of stuff coming. I think you'll really like it. And if you want some individual help, crafting your story, figuring out what to do, fixing problems, anything like that, you can book for free an appointment to get started doing that over at johnhelpsyourwritebetter.com. All power to all people. Stand up for those in trouble. Do the right thing. Make sure you take care and support one another. Love yourself. Drink some water. Take your meds. Wash your hands. And I will talk to you very, very soon. See ya.